He's all coasted out.
Come on, you must have one.
Oh no! If I have one, I have many, and I don't.
Okay.
I think Brad should be here. I really do.
Set the standards. Set the
I
standards.
know.
The parameters.
Brad, you really
can only go up.
If he'd
Anybody
set
have
the
my
tone,
Mormon rosary bead?
we might be willing to join in.
I think I'm gonna need that.
Here's a set.
I think
I would like to tell
However.
some Gary stories.
I knew you would like to tell the story.
Shut him up.
But
What the hell are you sleeping?
I gotta face him in the morning.
No, you don't.
And he knows God. I mean, Gary has been one of the. I met. When did I meet you?
It was June 20th,
Do your Gary impression, Mike.
at 3:14 p.m.
June
Do
20th.
your Gary impression.
I don't do a Gary impression.
Everyone does it.
Everyone does a Gary impression.
I don't.
Oh, we'll set it.
I've never done Gary. And he's a gentleman. Have I ever told you how much I respect him?
Yes, right after you lit the cigarette. I don't know.
I was telling actually a couple of people earlier this evening about one of the thrills of my life was going with Gary and Ellen and Brad and Nancy before they knew each other.
Ellen and Gary?
No, Brad and Nancy.
They knew
Before
each other
anybody
long
knew
time
that they
before.
knew each other.
But in the biblical sense.
In the biblical sense.
That was 9 months ago.
And we went down to Riverside Park, which, as everybody knows, is in Agawam, Massachusetts, which is slightly beyond the end of the earth. And
Mike, Agawam is an Indian name. What is it?
your teepee's on fire. I don't know. It's great. But we went down. Gary said, we've got to go. He says, I want to ride the roller coaster. I hear it's a 5-star roller coaster. I love roller coasters. I love going to amusement parks. We must. And so we stole Arnold's Wagoneer and hiked down to Agawam one day.
And it poured rain.
It was a terrible day. We tried to hijack Joe, but he had better sense and decided he wasn't going to go. But we went down, we drove to Agawam, and I thought the roller coaster was going to be something. Gary drove. Have you ever ridden with Gary on a highway?
Everybody in this room has driven with Gary once.
I took my lessons from Harold Sandhouse.
But we rode with Gary. We went down to Agawam, and Gary said, we got into the park. It's a huge park. Never been there before. We walked around the park and discovered, finally, the sign for the roller coaster. It had some extraordinary name. I don't know what it was. Thunderbolt? What was it? Something. And we saw the sign. We saw some stairs going up towards it. Nothing. There was nobody there. We rushed up the stairs and ran along a catwalk, only to discover there was a line hidden, and they were caged in. And we said, well, we'll wait in line. It can't be long. Can't be long. Well, an hour and a half later, at least, minimum of an hour and a half later, maybe a couple of hours later, we're still in this cage. Finally get up to the roller coaster. Now this man has sweated. He has stood there in pain, great agony. And the roller coaster cart comes along. They open up the gate and he says, I'm not going around that.
Why are we here?
Not that.
Obviously, he had seen the people getting off prior to that and decided there was no way that he was going to do that. He learned his true religion that day. So, Brad and Nancy and I, we get on the thing, we roll around a few times, come back down. How did you enjoy it? We loved it. Well, what are we going to do now? So we went over, we walked past some of these little booths, and there was a booth with a guy who said, "We'll guess your age. Within 2 years, we'll guess your age. And if we fail, you know, we'll give you the world, you know, whatever it takes, because we're so good at this." And this guy had been sitting there guessing ages, you know, taking a look at somebody and writing down their age and being within 2 years. He'd been doing this, obviously, for a career. And so Gary and I walk up to the guy, and we say, "Guess our age." The guy looks at us, and I look at him and say, "Think you'll do it, Dad?"
Now that's funny.
Hey, Mike, Steve liked that.
I was 44 and Gary was 67. Put it this way, the guy closed the shop and walked away, muttering. But that's it. Gary, it's been a real pleasure. A 2.5 years. We're going to miss you. It's been a real pleasure having you here, and I'll just offer once again.
Furthermore.
I'd like to repeat that.
Right.
Another toast to Gary Crowder,
Yes.
who has regaled us with laughter and cheer.
You're gonna laugh with this, right? Come on, I want a drink. I work for Wish. What can I say?
With hours, he's regaled us with his organ.
With his what?
And then he played a tune. A little clarification.
Maybe I didn't tell you about Gary's life.
I got the biggest organ in the New England.
Gary, when he first arrived in the scene here, you know, told us, he says,
You've got to see my organ.
I was a little confused with that.
He's been telling people that for years.
And my Leslie.
which we found out later was a speaker. But he uncrated finally in his new home on Drake at Ocean, or whatever that was over there.
Drake at Ocean.
I'm gonna write this and we can go skating.
Oh yes!
Summertime was tough.
We did that a lot.
Right.
He was going to put a speaker out and we could all dance around, but it didn't happen. But what did happen were parties at Gary's house where he played the organ for us, played. Brad sang, and they made spaghetti. And
Went home early.
And Brad kept singing.
I was there.
No, I really.
Are we going back to the drink?
Yes. Good. I wanted to thank Gary for introducing me to the finer points, the artistic, creative, the incredibly sensitive values of Hanna-Barbera and all the cartoons.
Warner Brothers.
One of the Warner Brothers.
Big
All right,
fan.
whatever.
Oh, that was a big gap.
Gary, best wishes, truly, to you and of course to Ellen. We hope that your move out to Salt Lake City is one for great enjoyment from both of you, and we'll miss you here.
Cheers. Thank you. Hey,
Drink now.
Thank you.
Brad,
Encore. Encore.
would you?
First, Mike, I want to. Are you done?
And I'd like to say.
Somebody turn the lights out.
Hey, he got rid of one. And the one he got rid of was worth 5 ordinary.
Can I have your drink?
No.
Bring it with me.
Oh, Cappington.
Well, we're going to have Brad tonight.
It's been done before.
Maybe someone else has a Gary Crowder story. Brad? The director says it's your turn, Brad.
Well, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking.
What did Al Jolson once say?
I do a 70-minute Jolson incident.
Sit back
No,
and relax.
Gary has accompanied me on. Can I be seated or do I need to rise?
Stand.
All right.
There's a better angle.
Hold it in.
Nice and happy
It's been a long time.
all of this festive occasion, and on behalf of the very lovely bride and groom,
Wrong notes.
I have Jordan Rich's car.
He's just started.
Talking about Michigan Pecos wedding. I don't know. But
Hey, thank me for the warm-up.
he's not bad. I've seen Johnny Olson do worse. How does one? That's true. Other than that, how does one adequately describe Gary Krug? That's the question that we all should ponder for a moment. I've asked myself this on I would describe Gary as the kind of guy who would come to an orgy bringing something in a covered dish. Okay.
My imagination just went.
I'm sorry, Steve, that required thought. Gary, we did want to mention to you that we've arranged your flight home to Utah. And we have some WLLH air trades for you on Frontier Airlines. We asked them when your flight leaves, and they said, what time can you get there? As a matter of fact, they've offered to drop you right at your home. There is no in-flight movie, but they promise you your life will pass before your eyes. 2 occasions. Well, Gary, you're here, and you're forgotten but not gone. No, that was the other way around. My association with Gary, going back 2 years, that feels like a millennium, is an association highlighted by a couple of, one of which was one of the first things that you and I did together was we immediately embarked for Las Vegas for the NAB convention of 1984. This is the spring of 1984. And Gary was telling me what a high roller he was. He was gonna show me Vegas like I would, and we went, he said, Brad, we're gonna go to all the hospitality rooms, we're gonna get slacked, the whole thing. Consider this, if you would. We went into the bar at the Vegas Hilton, and Gary wanted to impress me. And we walked up to the bar, he said to the bartender, I'd like my usual. And the bartender said, with or without Bosco. This is the truth. And from there we went to some of the hospitality rooms. There was that one minor indiscretion with the 2 cocktail waitresses. You remember that? Yeah. You were invited them back to the room. And there was all that screaming and yelling. How did you know that they weren't into a 4-hour Best of Yosemite Sam video? And with you that they had other ideas. We went from Vegas, Gary and I traveled down to California, drove into Los Angeles. We drove from, I have never been west in my entire life. Never. And Gary said, we're going to drive from Vegas into California. We got on the road, and I said, well, this is going real well. I had flop sweat already. We're hardly into this. We drove west, and I kept looking for the exits, and there weren't any. I'd never been out on that stretch of land before. You remember this, Gary? We drove into California. We went to Disneyland together. I had never been to Disneyland. And Gary and I went into the fun house. And we came out of the fun house, and the guard said to me, all right, put it back.
All right, put it back in the fun house. We'll explain it to you.
Bill will explain it later when you get home.
There will be pictures though.
This is all written by one of the most prolific writers of all time, a man named Ibbett. He seemed to write everything when I was in college. Anyway, Gary, as you know, a man of... He got that.
It was like
the law girl, you're Ibbett.
That's what she has on the logo.
Put it back. Yeah. Now you get
Gary, among many of his attributes, do you want to talk amongst yourselves? Gary, you got any more of his attributes is a very, very, I don't want to embarrass him, but I will, is a very, very religious man and a deep thinking, introspective man who's given to philosophy at the drop of a hat and drops his own hat frequently. Gary and I have had deep, very disturbing talks about the hereafter. And Gary believes that upon departing this mortal coil, that your soul...
what?
Coil. Mortal coil. Shuffle off the bubbler. Look, don't ruin the continuity.
You're gonna lose the
That
timing on
immediately
this
when you go, your soul goes to a Carvel in Newport, where it spends eternity putting jimmies on Fudgy the Whale. You know Tom Carvel, that's funny. Gary, let's talk about...
Brad.
Let's talk briefly about your checkered career as a broadcaster. Gary began shortly after military service in Honolulu, where he went on the air for Kiki, wasn't it? K-I-K-I?
Yes.
This is true.
Although it's pronounced Kiki.
Kiki.
Kiki in Honolulu means
Neck
ground.
Even then, Gary had a very entrepreneurial spirit and was always looking for other ventures, and one business venture did not work out for you, Gary. This is true. You remember in Hawaii when you tried to introduce the grass skirts with built-in fertilizer? That just didn't go.
Certainly didn't.
You get that
It was a little ahead of its time.
Sharon?
Then it was on to Newport, Gary.
Yes.
Then it was on to Newport, Gary. And the beginning of your association with Arnold Lerner. And not many people here know of the historic circumstances under which these two first met in Newport. I don't want to embarrass you again, Gary, but it won't stop me. Things were not going particularly well for you when you first met Arnold when you were downtown. Arnold was downtown and he dropped a nickel and it rolled into a grating and you wouldn't hand it back up to him. So after 18 years running the WADK in Newport,
It's only 15 years.
it seemed like 18. I'll do the funny stuff. It was after 18 years of running WADK in Newport, Gary, that you heeded the call to return to your native heartland in the West Coast, or it was Heartland Food Warehouse. I'm ad-libbing my own stuff. And there, you laid plans for the group ownership of what became the Listeners Network with your partners. Unfortunately, your partners had studied diplomacy with H.R. Haldeman and George and it was time to make other arrangements, and after hearing characteristically the beat of a different drummer, you joined the percussion section of the Baja Marimba Orchestra. To make a long story short, which is too late I think at this point, after a chance meeting of you and Arnold leading to a rekindling of your association and bringing you to the WLLH-WSSH family in the spring of 1984, in no time at all, the affection and respect of your sales staff and programming staff and the people working for you was embodied in a St. Bernard puppy the size of a small Fiat, which you were presented with, if you recall. Bernie Dog.
Yes.
Bernie Dog proceeded to supplement his diet with your stairs, your carpeting, and your septic system. And a Curator Courier delivery man, to this date, is still missing.
He's buried in the
That's right. Bernie Dog today lives a life of leisure and retirement somewhere on a farm in Methuen. At any rate, we do have a few other people who we want to call upon tonight to say a few words about you. Steve Chartrand is here with us tonight. Steve, of course, goes way back with Gary, and he has a few remarks. We do want to get Steve on quickly right now because, Steve, you told me earlier you have to go off to a business meeting tonight. One of Steve's many new ventures is the franchise Steve Chartrand Wedding Warehouses. Everything for the bride and groom, you say I do, and we will. Just call 1-800-HOOKED. Steve, we'd like you.
I don't have any Gary Crowder.
You don't have to. Just sit up and...
That sounds like laughing.
It'll be very brief. Speak your mind.
Short story.
Come on, we're friends.
Oh, please, Steve.
No, I really enjoyed working the last couple of years.
Get up, Harry! Get up!
No, I don't have anything to say.
Stand back. Hell up, will you please?
No!
Oh, tough crowd.
No, I don't have anything to say. I really don't. Other than, Gary, it's been a pleasure to work with you. We go back a few years, back even the 80K. 80K, is that right on it? 80K days. And I do want to, it's kind of a shame that Ellen is not here. And I do want to toast Ellen for putting up with you. For so many years. And give her our love.
I will.
And I wish you all the best.
2 or 3 times.
I really do.
Don't do anything to regret.
Yeah, really, please. No, I learned my lesson.
Well, also, this is the, apparently this is the main party voyage of Arnold and Maureen's, I don't know what we would like to call it, banquet room, party room, function room. We do want you to know that it is available for weddings and small parties. There is a yearly package available, $700 a year, including the pool and the tennis court. This is true. Now, Gary, being a very caring and sensitive man who has been both a friend and a mentor in a lot of different ways, we have gone through an awful lot in the past 2 years. We've gone through conventions, we've gone through storms, we've gone through the turbulence of 2 format changes, we've gone through endless technical problems, we've gone through Sam Creighton and JC. There have been frustrations and tears and successes and thrills and constant change and constant challenge. Gary, as a friend, has been with me personally through illnesses, through my marriage to Nancy, through the birth of my daughter in a space of 2 years, which is really quite remarkable when you come right down to it.
Her name is Meryl.
This is the sincere portion of the...
Why does illnesses immediately followed by marriage?
I can tell you that, Mike.
I'll talk to you later about it.
I think it'd be vice versa. It's the other way around. Most of what I've attributed to myself, I think, certainly goes for Nancy as well in reference to Gary and to the last 2 years. And I think that Gary could provide an education to anyone in this room in finding that almost impossible blend between being a good manager and a caring man who is a friend to virtually anyone willing to return friendship to him. I would at this point like to join Steve Chartrand, who said to you a moment ago, in proposing a toast to the singularly most important person in Gary's life, who under the circumstances, if they had been different, would be here with us tonight. I don't think another toast would hurt under the circumstances. To Ellen, who is waiting patiently in Utah for your return, Gary. Frankly, we miss you already. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm empty again. This is a metaphor for your serious part. Heavy work.
Arnold, or Arnold Lerner, or as he is known to the principles of noble broadcasting, the Attila the Hun of negotiation, would like to take a moment to put this evening in perspective. And we will then have the drawing, incidentally, on the chances we had earlier to win our grand prize this evening, which is a getaway weekend for 2 in the upstairs hall closet. Arnold?
Please. How about a hand? It's nice having a resident raconteur.
That'll see what religion
Does anybody else have any Gary Crowder stories? I don't know that anybody would want to try to follow that act, but...
or played it out.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Please, no, go ahead.
Oh,
If you have a story, come
I
on.
just wanted to say that Gary Crowder probably, when he first came in, increased WLLH sales by maybe 75%. by teaching salespeople that they couldn't go in to see clients with little green things hanging. That was something we'd been missing. I couldn't understand why people were throwing us out the door. Finally, Gary taught us. We had little green things hanging from our teeth, and that's why they wouldn't buy.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that.
As soon as you
I know
remove
Gary is a very religious man and spent a lot of time at St. Joseph's Shrine, but I couldn't understand really what he was doing there every day. Finally, and I couldn't understand how he was really making a living after a while at LLH. Sales were good, but they couldn't be that good to support the kind of lifestyle that he was accustomed to. And I walked into St. Joseph's one time at lunchtime, and I saw up on the altar, there was Gary, the human sacrifice at St. Joseph's Shrine, and people were praying to him. Now we know where Gary really comes from. This is a very special man, a special man that we've had working with us for all these years. And I wonder if he is St. Joseph. Gary, you've got a lot of pull upstairs. I just wanted to say thank you for all you've done. All these years.
Thank you. You know,
cheers.
We almost forgot one very important thing. And that's what makes Gary very different. Gary is so very different in so many ways from radio managers, but one thing that Gary possessed was a very, very important technical ability, and Gary has functioned for the last year basically as our chief engineer. And Gary has relentlessly babysat a rather geriatric transmitter out in Lawrence that is malfunctioning more times than it's functioning. And Gary wound up trundling and trolleying back and forth to Lawrence virtually every day. This has been going on for the past half year or longer, with that transmitter failing, going off the air, having trouble controlling it from Lowell and so forth. And Gary, more times than not, I would see you and you'd look at me very pained and say, "I have to go back to Lawrence." And we'd say, "Where's Gary?" And the answer would come back, "Gary's in Lawrence." So forth. So for that, Gary, we have an informal musicale we would like to present to you tonight. And I think this is an appropriate tune that I'd like my wife to join me in. And
Is this like Mr. Sandman?
yes. Only this one will be on key. Get up. This is appropriately entitled for you as you take your leave, "The Last Time I Saw Lawrence." This is something that I wrote by Jerome Kern. And it goes something like this. "The last time I saw Lawrence, the transmitter was down. The phone company had screwed things up, and Hal could not be found. No amperes, current, or voltage. The building's powered down. The landlord's only words for me were a verb and a pronoun. The last time I saw Lawrence, to restore the power again, was just a waste of time, for the building was condemned."
Encore.
Encore? Did someone say encore? Oh, you played right into my hand. For our grand finale. Our grand finale this evening. 1, 2, 1, 2. Who rang our phones at the crack of dawn? Gary. To tell us that he just mowed his lawn. Gary. You came from Salt Lake City with courage and conviction and the stuff. The Coens both are screaming, "Gary, we've already had enough." You brought us all into your home, Gary. Ellen has fed us all till we've moaned, Gary. Whoever thought a Mormon could show us how to party till we drop? We'll miss your constant phoning. We wish we could be cloning your classic brand of moaning.
I don't know, I guess I'm supposed to speak something. Speech.
No, Gary, you don't have to say anything, we're just gonna go now.
Okay.
Say something about each of us, Gary.
I really am surprised. It was a complete surprise. I don't know how you all kept knowing it like I do. I could keep it secret. But I thank you for coming this evening. Arnold is right. 1962 is when I first went to work for Arnold Lerner, and I would like to thank you, Arnold, for more than 75% of my, except when I was a monk and in the Navy.
At the same time.
It had something to do when I was a monk too, for all I know. I want to thank you for providing my livelihood for most of my adult life. I'm very, very grateful, eternally grateful. The reason I'm going back to Utah is recently Arnold Lerner has purchased Utah.
We'll put a stadium up.
I'm going back as the new prophet of the Mormon Church. Make sure all the...
Bring back polygamy.
What's St. Joseph? What are you gonna do? What I do?
I don't know. This 2.5 years has been really an education for me. Anybody knows anything about radio knows that probably the most difficult thing to run as far as a radio station goes is a low-powered AM with 2 towers within 20 miles of a major metropolitan area. I've learned a great deal, and I thank you all. I've been associated with a few radio stations in my short career, and the best thing I could say, so you know what I feel in my heart, is you're all a bunch of pros, and I've learned a lot from you, and I love you very dearly, and I'll cherish tonight, and especially the last 2 years and 3 months, or 3.5 months. And I know I have mixed emotions about leaving. It wasn't an easy decision, but I'm on my way Friday, and but you'll always be there beside me and behind me and sometimes in front of me. And I think we'll meet again, I'm sure. I'm very grateful for all of you. And great things are going to happen to WLLH. Just think of me once in a while. Thank you all very, very much.
Okay, does anybody else have a Gary Crowder story?
Oh.
G is for the great way. He always threw parties.
Then comes the letter
A is for the...
R is for the respect we have for you.
Y is... Give me a Y.
A.
He's got choreography, let him go.
I got it wrong.
do with Y?
Wait, I want to know that.
just for being you.
Yummy. Why? Because we're being you.
Frank, you want for credit.
Oh.
My favorite story.
Stand up.
It doesn't require standing.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
We'll be there, judge of
The day we had the belly dancer come into the sales meeting.
that was a great day, wasn't it?
Ellen is going to see this tape.
There's a far cry from St. Joseph's, I'll tell you that much, Gary.
It was my birthday.
We were having sales meetings at one of the small conference rooms at the Howard Johnson's in Chelmsford. Right in the middle of one of his presentations, this lady walked in, scantily clothed, and Gary's glasses steamed up. And she immediately put her sound gear down and started to dance. And the grin in his face kept getting wider and wider and wider.
I've never seen anything that large before.
But I'll never forget, he just kept saying over and over and over again, please don't tell Ellen. Please don't tell Ellen. If anybody tells Ellen, you're fired. And she swirled around and wrapped the scarf around his neck. It was a lot of fun. That's the best story. But,
She had "Happy Birthday, Gary" written on her belly button.
Gary, that was in Braille.
Oh, yeah. Make it work, so the word "happy" would go on, and it would go off, and "birthday" would go on, and then it would go off, and Gary would, I don't know, she did that.
sure could move.
But you researched that later, didn't you?
There is, Frank, are you?
Yeah.
Brad's got a story.
Oh, Brad, I've got another half an hour to do.
Frank, you're on.
Just been a,
I gotta check, oh, I'm sorry.
offer another toast
Oh.
Yeah.
to Gary.
Oh.
I know
You're not gonna show this in Salt Lake City, are you?
I am gonna miss him. I am gonna miss him dearly. Gary's been
I gotta light the alarm.
Gary's been the best
Right back
I've ever
together.
had.
Oh, thanks.
I miss him dearly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Here, here.
I gotta tell you one story about Brad.
Oh, no.
I can tell you a couple of stories about Brad.
Actually, I could tell a lot of stories about him.
I can tell you more than you want to know.
About 3 weeks after I'd been here, I need this job.
I need this job.
Brad was, we were in the hallway outside of his office, and he was being a little bit rambunctious. So I ran in, and I got a piece of tape. And I didn't know that Brad has a hairpiece.
Could you be more specific, please?
His lip. And I put this big piece of masking tape. I said, "Shut up," like this, over his mouth, and I pull it off, and this fuzzy little thing.
That's a true story. I'll vouch for that story. That's a true story.
I tell you something, I about had a mistake in the whole I was never so embarrassed in my entire life. I went to my office.
He locked the door.
I locked my door. I said, my God, what am I going to do?
I ripped his face off.
I ripped his face off.
He thought I was a leper.
He came in to the back like a
story.
Huh?
That's better than
Well, Brad.
He came in the door and he knocked the door and I opened the door and I said,
Can we do it for the camera?
I don't know what to say. He says, don't worry about it. He says, it's fake, you know. And I was never so mortified in my entire life.
And you never gave it back to him.
I had to make a new one. It's not easy to get that
Ever since
You have to chase those cats and everything.
I've always threatened about once a week to pull his face off ever since.
Brad, thank you for being with us so many years.
Anybody know any Brad stories?
I'm ready now. Now it's out of the bag.
Marie, get the gift for Brad.
I'm going to Utah with Gary. That was something that we had tried to keep kind of quiet.
Hey, Brad.
Very unusual situation.
We invited you to the surprise party for you.
Is it a surprise? Surprise!
I wouldn't have had it if Gary wasn't leaving. That was quite a moment, Gary, in our career together. And I didn't know how to convey to you that it was really all right.
I was scared. I was thinking,
And then I
how am I
grabbed
going to
Brad
go in and
from
tell
here.
Arnold I just pulled the program director's face off?
I almost done it in the past.
Oh no, I never worked with the fake.